Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk at this conference. There's a gap between the personal focus of data protection legislation and practice and the communal implications of internet-connected technology. This talk summarizes some of our recent and ongoing efforts to address this gap. I will introduce the problem space before illustrating a promising research approach by discussing two case studies, and I will conclude with offering some implications for research design and practice. The use of internet-connected technology is often accompanied by concerns of privacy and data protection. And here I briefly highlight communal aspects of privacy as they are reflected in legislation and in the academic literature. Legislation is traditionally concerned with an individual right to privacy. For example, the General Data Protection Regulation explicitly excludes households from its consideration. The California Consumer Privacy Act includes households as a label and defines them as deserving of data protection rights, but does so without a clear definition of what personal information constitutes or means in relation to the concept of a household. In the academic literature, privacy beyond the individual has of course been approached in various different technological contexts and providing different interpretations. To name one, group privacy is often referred to in terms of differential privacy research. To name another one, networked privacy has been researched in context of online social networks. But overall, there's a lack of understanding of privacy in communal spaces. So what are communal spaces and why are they interesting? Communal spaces are shared spaces such as homes or cafes or airports, and we find that these spaces are increasingly equipped with ambient and pervasive internet-connected technology. It is in these spaces that heterogeneous groupings of individuals come together. These could be families, these could be groups of friends, this could be individual travelers, and so we see different dynamic social structures. We can imagine that there are sometimes attributed responsibilities and sometimes unattributed responsibilities, and we can definitely expect to see varying levels of skill when it comes to the use and administration of technology. And we have already seen that privacy is in itself is context dependent and highly situational, and that there is a lack of understanding of what privacy might mean within these contexts. So we ask, how can research explore and facilitate design for privacy in communal spaces? One way to approach this question is through co-design workshops. And we inspired our research approach by the future workshop format, which has been used successfully by others before us to investigate issues where no clear understanding, no clear definition of any theory was at hand. The format includes 3 stages, 2 of which we adopted. We adopted critiquing the present and envisioning the future. We did not adopt the implementation change stage. The method has inherently a focus on social and communal factors, which benefits our desire to understand privacy in communal spaces. We also decided to facilitate these workshops by using design techniques and artifacts, simply to see if they could be useful, but also to bring in more diversity in terms of contextual information, background information. I will briefly introduce the 2 parts as we conceptualize them for our workshops. In part A, critiquing the present, we have 3 stages. So first we want to explore the social and physical aspects of shared spaces because we know that they are relevant to understandings of privacy. We do this through affinity diagramming and sketching, in some sense similar to the kind of techniques and methods used for context scenarios. As context to explore, we choose the home and the cafe. In the second step, we want to attune to popular data protection issues to bring the ideas of privacy and security and the methods of data protection to the forefront. We use 2 different examples to do this. We have browser bar ad logs, the green pad logs, to discuss one example of a security aspect. And we use the mobile application permissions to discuss some of the more privacy-related aspects people are largely familiar with, they have encountered with in their own lived experiences. This phase is researcher-led, and then we have a third phase where we hope participants take more the lead, and they do so in reflecting on further issues of data protection. To facilitate this phase, we also provide a list of guiding questions just in case the participants would still struggle to relate to the issue. The second phase, RB, is all about envisioning the future and actually doing some design work. So as a first step, we ask to our groups to design for any one of the shared spaces they explored in part A. And for this part, we assist when prompted, when asked, and optionally we provide them a set of personas just to allow them to be more creative in filling the social and physical space they had been thinking about in part A. As a second step, we ask them to consider a different social and physical space, a different kind of shared space than the one they had considered for the first design exercise here. Either we ask them to use one of their own, which they also sketched in part A, or we ask them to use the sketch of a different group. And finally, we ask them to reflect on the overall design process and their experience, and of course to present their design solutions to the group. We piloted the approach with 4 groups of students and expert researchers at our department. Their task was to co-design a good internet connection experience, considering usable security and privacy, and we asked them to do so for homes and cafes. So naturally, according to our approach, the first step was to explore the cafe and the home as communal spaces, considering social and physical aspects. And they were then asked to create design solutions for a good internet connection experience, simply the process of connecting or logging into a Wi-Fi network in either space. I will now present 2 case studies from these workshops. The first case study describes a concept called the data flush, and the second case study talks about putting a password in the kitchen cupboard. The data flush was a concept by group number 2. And group number 2 was asked to design their good internet connection experience based on a sketch of a cafe that was actually created by group number 1. One of the goals of group number 2 was to focus on achieving anonymity on the Wi-Fi network during and after using the network. They wanted devices to be remembered for 24 hours though, simply for better usability. And they considered that if they came back and they were prompted to log in again, so showing that the network did not remember them, was a proof of erasure of their data. They further discussed the issue and they realized that a more sort of tactile solution actually would also have benefits. And so they came up with this idea of the data flush. So the data flush simply provides this reassurance of data actually being deleted by tapping out. And they discussed where this flush could be located. So initially they had considered a group of friends entering the cafe, buying some drinks, getting access to the network at the till, and then sitting down at a table and sharing the table. And so once they would be done drinking their drinks or simply wanted to move on, they would tap out, and that tapping out would flush all of the data, and anonymity was restored. The first thing they realized was that one of the friends might leave earlier than others, and so they simply said, well, the last person to leave the table could just flush all of the data. When they took a second look at the context sketch, they also saw that, of course, people who are not friends may not arrive at the same time, may not want to interact with each other, could also share the same table. In the picture that is shown as two people working on their laptops. So they had a need to revise their design, and the way they solved this situation was by moving the button from the table to the door so that people would get their access to the network individually when buying a drink at the till or by other means, but could also tap out of the network individually when leaving the cafe. Group number 4 designed a solution, a network connection solution for the home. And they were asked to consider different personas in doing so. So we can see David, Matthew, and Sarah in the solution sketch on the right-hand side. Their solution considered how to make the network secure, but also accessible for people with different skills. And they came up with a sort of connect button, very similar to what is available already. They then also came up with a connect app so that the more technological able person, in this case Sarah, could enable others to connect to the network even though she might not be at home. They further considered that having the button at the router was not particularly secure, given that guests could make use of it unsupervised, and that the app with Sarah was probably not particularly useful if Sarah didn't have any reception or simply could not attend to the issue. So they also wanted David and Matthew to be more independent. They considered various different solutions for this. Ultimately, they realized that by putting a password for the Wi-Fi network into the kitchen cupboard, they could make use of a kind of semi-public space, as they described it. The kitchen cupboard being a space people who would live in the home could access and would also know about, but not being a space people who would not live in the home or not be frequent visitors and trusted friends, and the kitchen cupboard not being a space those people would access. Now I would like to offer some reflections on our methodology and on the findings from our pilot study. First of all, there are some obvious limitations here. The pilot study made use of students as participants only. And of course, you can say that students are somewhat limited in their lived experiences, particularly pertaining to the home as a context. And of course, we made a deliberate choice when we choose the home and a cafe as two very different physical and social contexts. The cafe as being more public and the home as being a more private space. Insights from the design artifacts, though, allowed participants to readjust the appropriateness of their proposed design solutions. For example, personal characteristics from personas allowed them to reconsider whether every individual could use a particular solution and how they could accommodate for the needs of individuals. And rules and relationships, as they found their way into the context sketches of our groups, but also as they were taken by our participants from the context sketches for their design solutions, were quite relatable to them. And on one instance, a group discussed how rules and relationships were much more relatable than social norms or social obligations. So they found this easier to deal with. We also can say then that such artifacts can help surface some of the sort of tacit contextual variations that otherwise are known to influence co-design, particularly for privacy. So it seems these artifacts can be quite useful. Some reflections on our findings. The friends who shared the coffee table sort of had a common goal, and maybe because of that common goal, they were able to share data protection responsibilities. So then there might be a potential role for the use of social groupings and framing discussions around design. And these social groupings can be friends with common goals, could be families with small children, or any other characteristics of groups. And then the need for individuals to consider the abilities and needs of others draws particularly attention to the kind of relationships people have in these shared spaces. And of course, they can be really complicated, but also in recognizing these relationships, which are maybe sometimes dependent relationships, such as parents and their children, or sometimes more equal relationships, such as between spouses or between people who share a flat. There can be benefit in further exploring and considering these relationships. And something like storing a password in a kitchen cupboard because it is a semi-private space also illustrates the actual resourcefulness of participants and how creative they can be in enabling data protection in communal spaces. So this provides insight as to how valuable the method can be. So I will conclude with a few implications here. It seems that communal spaces and concomitant relationships are important considerations for design of internet-connected technologies. And it seems that structured contextual artifacts, such as those that capture social and physical aspects of these communal spaces, can help to inform data protection, can help to inform design for data protection. But it also seems that our approach, communal participatory design, might be useful to innovate for privacy beyond the individual. With that, I would like to conclude my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.